The mountain wind howled across the valley, carrying the scent of smoke and ash. Every villager in the kingdom had heard the same terrifying sound for months, the roar of the wild dragon trapped in the royal arena. It was said that even the earth trembled when it breathed, that its fire could melt stone and blind men from miles away. They called it Ignathar, the Red Storm, a beast so fierce that no chain could hold it for long. For weeks, knights, mages, and dragon trainers came from distant lands to try their luck. They all wanted the king's reward, a fortune in gold and a title of honor for whoever could control the monster. But one by one they failed. The dragon's wings would spread wide, its roar would shake the sky, and then, with a single sweep of its tail, it would send men flying like straw dolls. No one ever got close again at dawn. The arena always smelled of burnt steel and charred sand. The iron bars around the cage were blackened, melted in places, and behind them, the dragon's golden eyes glowed like twin suns in the dark. It didn't pace or struggle anymore. It just waited, breathing slow, each exhale a plume of smoke curling into the cold morning air. From the castle balcony, King Aldrin looked down at the beast and frowned. "Another failure," he muttered, tossing a scroll onto the table. "Your Majesty," said the royal advisor, bowing low, "we have sent for the most skilled trainers from the Eastern Isles. They claim to know dragon language." The king sighed. "Then they had better hurry. That creature has already cost me 3 soldiers and half a stable's worth of meat." The advisor nodded quickly, though even he looked pale when the dragon growled from below, while the nobles spoke of gold and glory. In the lower courtyards, the stable boys worked in silence. Among them was a young man named Eli. Thin, quiet, and unnoticed by most, he cleaned stalls, brushed horses, and fetched water from the well each morning. He didn't speak much to anyone, not because he was shy, but because he listened. He had learned to read the way animals moved, the way they breathed when they were scared, or the way their eyes softened when they trusted you. And sometimes he wondered if dragons weren't so different. That morning, as Eli carried 2 buckets of water to the stables, he heard the sound of shouting near the arena. Another trainer had arrived, wearing bright red robes and carrying a long silver staff. The crowd gathered to watch, whispering with hope and fear. Eli stopped by the fence, curious. The trainer stepped into the arena and struck the ground with his staff, sparks flying. "In the name of the crown, I command you to bow," he shouted at the dragon. The dragon lifted its head slowly, eyes narrowing. For a moment, the air went still, and then it roared. Flames exploded outward, the trainer screamed, and the soldiers pulled him away as smoke filled the sky. The crowd scattered, and Eli stood frozen as bits of ash drifted down like dark snow. When the smoke cleared, the dragon sat still again. Unbothered, it blinked once, and for the briefest moment, Eli thought it looked tired, not wild, not evil, just lonely. He didn't know why, but his heart ached at that sight. Later that day, when everyone had gone, Eli walked by the dragon's cage. He was supposed to dump the leftover water for the horses, but something stopped him. The dragon's eye caught the light again, glowing faintly in the shadows. It was watching him. Eli froze, gripping the bucket. Every story he'd ever heard told him to run. Dragons didn't think. They killed, but instead of fear, he felt something else. He looked back and whispered softly, "You're not angry, are you? You're just tired." The dragon's head tilted slightly. Eli swallowed hard, then took a small step closer. "Don't worry, I'm not here to hurt you," he said quietly. The guards nearby chuckled. "Hey boy, don't talk to that thing. It'll roast you alive before you can scream." Eli ignored them, setting the bucket down beside the cage. The dragon's eyes followed him, glowing brighter. He could hear its slow breathing, deep, heavy, like thunder under the earth. Something told him it understood more than people thought. Without thinking, Eli whispered, "Please." That single word slipped from his lips like a prayer. He didn't know why he said it. Maybe because no one had ever said please to the dragon before. The air went completely silent, even the guards stopped laughing. The dragon blinked once, its tail stopped moving, and its nostrils flared softly. It leaned its head just a little closer to the bars, its breath warm against the cold air. Eli stepped back, his heart pounding, but the dragon didn't move again. It just looked at him, not with anger, but curiosity. He couldn't explain it, but he felt as though it was waiting for something, waiting for someone to see it not as a weapon, but as a living being. When Eli finally turned to leave, the dragon gave a low, Rumbling sound, not quite a growl, not quite a sigh. The boy looked back and smiled faintly. "I'll come back tomorrow," he whispered. And though no one else believed it, the guards later swore the dragon lowered its head slightly, as if bowing in return. That night, as Eli lay on the hay in the stables, he couldn't sleep. He kept hearing that sound. The dragon's deep exhale, the soft glow of its eyes. He didn't know what he had started, but for the first time, the beast that no one could tame had not roared, it had listened, and all it took was a single word. "Please." Morning sunlight poured through the cracks of the old stable. Painting golden lines across the hay, Eli woke early, rubbing his eyes and listening to the soft snorts of the horses still asleep in their stalls. His mind was still on the dragon, on the quiet moment they had shared the day before. No one believed what he had seen, that the beast had listened, that it had stopped roaring, that for one heartbeat its fury had vanished. When he told the other stable hands, they laughed. "Sure, Eli. Next you'll say it smiled at you," one said. Throwing him a piece of bread, another added, "You're lucky you didn't end up a pile of ashes." Eli didn't argue. He just smiled weakly and went back to work. He had learned long ago that words didn't change much. Only actions did. As the day went on, he carried water, brushed the king's white stallion, and fixed broken harnesses. But every time he looked toward the distant arena, his heart pulled him there. He couldn't shake the memory of that soft breath of fire, the way the dragon had tilted its head. It was like it had understood the word please, and maybe it had wanted to hear it again by noon. Eli found himself walking the path toward the cage once more. The guards at the gate squinted when they saw him. "Back again, boy?" one of them said, smirking. "I have orders to bring fresh water," Eli lied quickly. Raising the bucket in his hand, they shrugged, laughing. "Go on. If you want to get yourself cooked, don't say we didn't warn you." Inside the arena, the air was heavy with smoke and heat. The dragon lay half in shadow, its red scales glowing faintly, its chest rising and falling like the tide. Eli stopped a few steps away and waited, not daring to speak too fast. He remembered how animals could feel fear, and how calm could sometimes travel through silence. He set the bucket down, letting the water slosh gently. The dragon's golden eyes opened. Locking onto him again, Eli swallowed hard. "Good morning," he said softly. The dragon blinked, tilting its massive head slightly, its claws dug into the earth. Not in anger, but like it was thinking. "You remember me, don't you?" Eli asked quietly. He smiled nervously, unsure why he was talking as if the creature could understand. "Yesterday I said please," he whispered. "And you didn't burn me, so I thought, maybe we could try again." The dragon huffed, a small cloud of smoke rising. Eli took that as a yes, or at least not a no. He sat down near the cage, close enough to feel the warmth of its body but far enough to stay safe. For a long while, neither of them moved. The only sound was the slow dripping of water and the dragon's deep breathing. It felt peaceful, something no one in the kingdom would ever believe possible. Hours passed and the sun began to set, painting the arena in orange light. Eli noticed scars running along the dragon's neck, thick and uneven. "Who did this to you?" he murmured. The dragon growled softly. Not at him, but at the memory. Eli's heart ached. He knew that kind of pain, the kind that never really went away. He leaned forward and whispered, "I'm sorry." The dragon's head lowered, its golden eyes half closing. As if those two words had meaning it hadn't heard before, Eli didn't know why. But he started talking, not about dragons, but about himself. About how he had been brought to the castle as a child after his village burned down. How he never knew his parents, only the sound of fire and screams. And how he had learned to care for the king's animals because they were the only ones who never yelled back. The dragon's tail moved slowly. Brushing the ground with a sound like wind through leaves, Eli smiled faintly. "You've lost things too, haven't you?" he said. The dragon made a low rumble. Not threatening, but deep and sad in that sound. Eli heard something human, something ancient. It was grief. He realized then that the dragon wasn't a monster. It was a prisoner. When Eli finally stood to leave, the dragon did something no one had ever seen. It moved closer, until its head rested near the bars, eyes level with his. Its breath warmed his face, and for the first time Eli saw softness there. He reached out, trembling, and placed his hand on the iron. The dragon didn't pull away, it blinked slowly, the great golden eyes shimmering in the dying light. Then, very quietly, it made a sound, not a growl, but something like a sigh. Eli smiled and whispered again, "Please, just trust me." The dragon's nostrils flared, and it let out a short huff of air, blowing his hair back. He laughed softly. "I'll take that as a yes." When he turned to go, the dragon's gaze followed him until he disappeared into the corridor. Outside the arena, 2 guards stared at each other, pale-faced. "Did you see that?" one whispered. "The beast didn't attack," said the other. It bowed. Neither spoke again, afraid that saying it aloud might break the spell. That night, Eli couldn't sleep again. He lay awake listening to the night insects and the faint crackle of torches outside. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those golden eyes, not full of rage, but of memory. He realized something powerful, something no one else in the kingdom could see. The dragon didn't need control, it needed understanding. It didn't need a whip, it needed a friend. The next morning, before dawn, Eli decided he would go back again. He didn't care about rewards or danger or what the king might say. Something deep inside told him that this was the beginning of something greater than himself. He didn't know it yet, but by choosing kindness over fear, he had already done what no trainer, soldier, or mage had ever done. He had made the dragon listen, and that was only the beginning. The next morning came quiet and cold. With mist rolling down the mountains and creeping through the castle gates, Eli woke before sunrise, brushing bits of hay off his shirt and splashing water on his face from a wooden bucket. He felt something different inside him that day. Not fear, not duty, but a strange pull, as if something inside the dragon had reached into him and refused to let go. While the other stable boys grumbled about chores and breakfast, Eli packed a small piece of bread, filled a bucket of clean water, and made his way toward the arena. When he reached the iron gate, the guards gave him that same doubtful look. "You again?" one said, half amused, half concerned. Eli nodded quietly. "I'm just giving it water, that's all." The guard sighed, unlocking the gate. "Boy, one day you'll step too close and it'll swallow you whole." Eli smiled faintly. If it wanted to, it already would have. He walked past them before they could reply, his boots crunching softly on the stone path. The dragon was awake, lying in the shade with its massive wings folded tight against its body. Its red scales glimmered faintly in the dim light, like embers buried under ash when Eli entered. The dragon lifted its head slowly and their eyes met once more. Eli stopped a few steps away and said softly, "Good morning." The dragon blinked, exhaling a soft breath that sent ripples through the dust. That was all the answer Eli needed. He placed the bucket down near the bars, poured a little water into a shallow stone trough, and waited. To his surprise, the dragon moved closer, its heavy claws scraping the earth. It lowered its head and sniffed the water, then began to drink, slow and steady. Eli couldn't help smiling. "You were thirsty, huh?" he whispered. The dragon paused, glanced at him for a second, then kept drinking. The sound of it, slow, rhythmic, alive, made Eli's chest feel warm. When the dragon finished, Eli sat down on a rock beside the cage. He didn't talk much, he just sat there, quietly humming to himself. It was an old lullaby his mother used to sing before she died, a tune he barely remembered, but somehow it felt right. The dragon's head tilted slightly, one golden eye fixed on him. It didn't snarl or roar, it simply listened, the slow rise and fall of its chest matching the rhythm of the song. As the hours passed, Eli began to speak softly, telling the dragon stories, not grand tales of knights or kings, but small things. How the horses hated the rain, how the baker's cat always stole fish from the kitchen. The dragon didn't move, but he could feel it listening. He could sense that it understood tone, even if not words, every time he spoke gently. Its breathing slowed and its eyes softened. That's when Eli realized something powerful. This creature wasn't wild by nature. It was broken by men. At one point, he noticed a deep scar near its shoulder. Still fresh and raw, without thinking, he whispered, "Does it hurt?" The dragon turned its head toward him. Nostrils flaring, Eli took a slow breath and said, "If you'll let me, I can help." He tore a strip from his shirt, dipped it into the water, and reached through the bars. The dragon didn't move, though its eyes stayed locked on his hand. Slowly, gently, Eli pressed the damp cloth against the scar. The dragon's body tensed, then relaxed. It made a low, soft rumble, not a growl, but something almost like gratitude. Eli smiled. "See? It's okay, I won't hurt you." That moment was when the bond began, not through power but through trust. Every day after that, Eli came back, and sometimes with food, sometimes with water, sometimes just to sit and talk. The dragon began to move closer to the bars when it saw him. It even made small sounds, deep, short hums that Eli started to recognize as emotions. One day when he was late, the dragon let out a long, low call that echoed across the valley until Eli appeared. The guards were terrified, but Eli laughed softly. "You missed me, didn't you?" He started giving the dragon a name, Ashwing, because when it spread its wings, the light made them look like waves of glowing ash. The dragon didn't seem to mind the name. In fact, it always rumbled when he said it, like it was answering. Each day their bond grew stronger, built not on orders but respect. Eli noticed that Ashwing's fire had changed too. Before, it burned wild and bright, scorching everything nearby. Now it glowed softer, its heat controlled, its breath no longer full of rage. Sometimes, Eli would lie on the ground near the cage. Watching the clouds, he would talk about the stars, about how he dreamed of flying one day. To see the world the way only dragons could, Ashwing would raise its head, looking toward the sky too, and for a few seconds, it almost looked like they shared the same dream. But not everyone in the kingdom saw this bond as a miracle. Rumors began to spread, whispers among the soldiers and nobles. They said the stable boy had bewitched the dragon with dark magic, that his kindness was only a trick, that the beast was pretending to obey. Even the king began to worry, for a dragon that listened to a boy was more dangerous than one that burned cities. One afternoon, the royal trainer, Sir Garin, came to the arena. He sneered when he saw Eli sitting calmly near the cage. "So, this is the great dragon whisperer," he said mockingly. Eli stood and bowed. "I just try to be gentle, sir." "Gentle?" Garin scoffed. "That's not how you control dragons. They only understand strength and fear." He grabbed a whip from a nearby rack and stepped closer to the bars. Before Eli could stop him, the whip cracked across the air. Striking near the dragon's wing, Ashwing roared, shaking the ground, flames bursting high into the air. Eli shouted, "Stop! You're scaring it." But Garin only laughed. "Good, let it fear us." In a blur, Ashwing slammed its tail against the cage, bending the metal. The guards stumbled back in panic, shouting orders. Eli rushed forward, standing between the whip and the dragon. "Please!" he cried, the same word he had used on the first day. The sound of his voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Ashwing froze instantly, smoke curling from its nostrils. Its golden eyes locked onto Eli. Calm again. Controlled again. Everyone went silent. Even Garin stepped back, stunned. Eli turned to the dragon and said softly, "It's okay." "They didn't mean it," the dragon huffed, a single puff of warm smoke brushing his face, and then slowly it lay down again, wings folding tight. The guards whispered in awe, "By the gods!" He calmed it. Eli didn't hear them. He was still looking into the dragon's eyes. In that gaze, he felt something powerful, something ancient and unspoken. The bond between fire and flesh was no longer a dream. It was real, and though Eli didn't know it yet, that bond would soon shake the entire kingdom. Because once a dragon trusts a human, no chain can ever hold it again. The news spread through the castle like wildfire, carried on whispers that burned faster than any dragon's flame. They said the wild beast that no man could tame now bowed its head to a stable boy. They said the dragon no longer roared when Eli spoke, and that a single word from his lips could still its fury. The soldiers called it a miracle. But the nobles called it madness, and the king, trapped between curiosity and fear, could not decide which it was from his throne. King Aldrin listened as his advisors argued, their voices rising like crows in the hall. "Your Majesty," said Sir Garin, still nursing a burn on his arm, "that creature is not tamed, it's tricking the boy. The moment we lower our guard, it will strike." "But sire," said another, "if the boy has truly calmed it, perhaps he has a gift. Perhaps he can be useful to the crown." The king rubbed his temples, his mind heavy with doubt. "Useful or dangerous," he muttered. "Both are the same if not controlled." Meanwhile, down in the lower courtyards, Eli went about his chores as usual. He didn't seek fame or praise. He only wanted to make sure the dragon, Ashwing, was safe. But everywhere he went, people stared. Stable boys whispered behind his back. Guards watched his every move. And even the cooks fell silent when he entered the kitchen. He could feel it in their eyes. A strange mix of awe and suspicion. The kind of look people give to someone they don't understand. That afternoon, when Eli walked to the arena, the guards blocked his way. "New orders," said one. holding a parchment stamped with the royal seal. "No one enters the dragon's cage without the king's permission." Eli frowned. "But it hasn't eaten yet. It trusts me. It won't take food from anyone else." The guard hesitated. "Sorry, boy." "Orders are orders." Eli sighed and turned away. But as he did, he heard a deep rumble from within the cage. Ashwing had felt his absence that night. As darkness settled over the castle, Eli couldn't rest. He lay awake, listening to the faint echoes of the dragon's distant roars. They weren't the wild, angry cries of before. They were different, hollow, lonely. He rose quietly, grabbed a lantern, and slipped out through the stables. The guards at the arena gate were dozing, and Eli moved like a shadow through the fog. When he reached the cage, Ashwing lifted its head at once, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "Hey," Eli whispered, setting the lantern down. "I'm sorry. They wouldn't let me come today." The dragon snorted softly. Smoke curling through the cold air, Eli smiled. "I know. I missed you too." He reached through the bars, brushing his fingers against the cool scales. Ashwing leaned closer, letting out a low sound and not a growl, but something gentler. Like a purr made of thunder, Eli chuckled quietly. "If only they could see you like this." The next morning, the arena was busier than ever. Word had reached the king that Eli had broken the new rule, but instead of punishing him, the king ordered something unexpected, a demonstration. "Let the boy prove his so-called power before the court," King Aldrin declared. "If the dragon obeys him, we will see its worth with our own eyes." The day of the trial came with banners flying high and drums echoing through the valley. The entire kingdom gathered to see the sight. The arena floor shimmered with heat as soldiers stood in a wide circle. Crossbows loaded. Eli was brought in wearing a plain shirt, his hands trembling slightly. At the far end, Ashwing waited, chained and restless, its wings twitching with frustration. The roar it gave when it saw the crowd shook the stone walls, sending birds scattering from the towers. "Begin," said the king, his voice cold. Eli took a deep breath. Stepping forward slowly, he could feel hundreds of eyes on him, waiting for him to fail. He stopped a few feet from the dragon and said softly, "Hey, it's okay. It's just me." Ashwing's head snapped toward him, smoke billowing from its nostrils. The crowd gasped, but Eli didn't move. Instead, he placed his hand over his chest and whispered, "Please." The word echoed through the arena like a spell. Ashwing froze, the chains clinking softly. Then slowly it lowered its head, eyes softening. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and even the king leaned forward. His mouth slightly open, Eli walked closer. Until he stood right beside the cage, he reached out, touching the dragon's snout gently. The heat of its breath brushed his arm, but it didn't burn. It was calm, utterly, impossibly calm. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Every soldier stood frozen, not daring to move. Eli smiled faintly. "See? It's not angry. It just needed kindness." But before the moment could sink in, Sir Garin stepped forward, his eyes filled with hate. "This is not control." He shouted, "It's witchcraft! The beast is deceiving us." He raised his whip again, but the king's hand shot up. "Enough," Aldrin said, his tone sharp. "I've seen what I needed to see." He turned to Eli. "You will continue tending the dragon, under supervision. If it obeys you again, we will train it for war." Eli's heart sank. "For war," he repeated softly. The king nodded. "A beast like that could make us unstoppable." Eli glanced at Ashwing, who had lifted its head again, uneasy. He felt the weight of those words like iron in his chest. He didn't tame the dragon to make it a weapon. He freed its heart, not its rage, that night as torches burned high in the towers. Eli sat by the cage again, he whispered. "They don't understand, Ashwing. They'll try to use you. They'll never see who you really are." The dragon's golden eyes glowed softly, reflecting his face like a mirror. It let out a quiet sound, a deep hum that seemed almost like sorrow. Eli reached through the bars and said, "Don't worry. I'll protect you." Far above them, the king stood at his balcony watching. The sight of boy and beast sitting in peace sent a chill down his spine. He turned to his advisor and said quietly, "That bond, it's powerful." The advisor bowed his head. "Yes, Your Majesty, and power like that never stays gentle for long down below." The night wind carried the faint sound of Ashwing's breathing. Slow, steady, alive, but hidden beneath that calm. Something darker was beginning to stir, not in the dragon, but in the hearts of men who feared what they could not control. The bond between Eli and Ashwing had become more than a legend. It had become a threat, and the kingdom was not ready for what was coming. The morning sky burned gold as the sun rose above the castle towers, but inside the royal arena the air was heavy with fear. Chains rattled against stone as Ashwing pulled restlessly at its bindings, wings twitching, eyes filled with unease. The guards stood tense, holding their crossbows ready, though none dared come too close. Eli stood at the edge of the cage, his hands trembling as he whispered softly, "It's all right. I'm here." For days after the king's declaration, soldiers had worked to strengthen the cage. They replaced iron with steel, doubled the locks, and even carved strange symbols into the walls, runes to weaken the dragon's fire. Eli watched helplessly as they tightened the chains. Every clang of metal made Ashwing flinch. Every torch brought fear back into its eyes. He had spent weeks earning that creature's trust, and now he watched the court destroy it again. When Eli pleaded with the king to stop, the answer was simple and cold. "It's not a pet, boy. It's a weapon," said King Aldrin, "and soon it will obey the crown or die trying." Eli's stomach twisted at those words. He had never wanted power, he only wanted peace. But now the same kindness that had created their bond was being twisted into something cruel. That evening he sneaked back into the arena after the guards left. The air was thick with smoke and the torches flickered low. Ashwing's golden eyes met his in the dim light. Weary and pained, Eli dropped to his knees beside the bars, his voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." The dragon rumbled low, its breath hot and uneven. He could almost feel the hurt in its chest. Not from chains, but from betrayal. Eli touched the bars gently. "They want to make you fight, but you don't have to." Ashwing's wings twitched. The great scales rippling like fire under skin, Eli whispered, "Do you trust me?" The dragon stared at him for a long time and then slowly lowered its head. Eli smiled through the tears in his eyes. "Then we're leaving." The next night came with thunder, the sky flashing with restless light. While most of the guards huddled inside the barracks to avoid the storm, Eli crept into the arena. The rain poured down in sheets, soaking his clothes. Turning the ground into mud, lightning cracked across the clouds, lighting up the dragon's body like a sculpture of fire and shadow. Eli worked quickly, unlocking the small latch at the side of the cage, a passage meant for feeding. The metal groaned, loud and sharp. Ashwing's head turned, its golden eyes alive with understanding. "Quiet now," Eli whispered, his voice trembling. "We have to move fast." He climbed the bars. Pulling the heavy latch upward, the storm masked the noise, thunder roaring each time the chains loosened. Ashwing began to shift, its muscles flexing, the ground vibrating beneath its weight. When the last lock snapped open, the dragon stretched its wings wide for the first time in months. The wind from that single movement blew out every torch in the arena. Plunging the world into darkness, Eli clung to the bars, gasping. As rain lashed across his face, he looked up. Eyes filled with awe and fear, Ashwing stood free, towering, magnificent, a living flame against the storm. The dragon looked down at him, its eyes bright and wild. "Go," Eli whispered. "You're free now." But Ashwing didn't move. It simply lowered its massive body, bowing slightly. The meaning was clear, and it wouldn't leave him behind. Eli hesitated only a moment before climbing onto its back. The scales were slick with rain, warm beneath his hands. When he settled between its shoulder ridges, the dragon tilted its head toward the sky. The sound that came next was like thunder given a voice, a roar that tore through the storm and echoed across the valley. Guards rushed from their shelters, shouting in panic as the ground shook beneath their boots. "Sound the alarm," someone screamed, but it was too late. Ashwing leapt into the air, wings snapping open with a crack that shattered the rain. Each beat of its wings lifted them higher, through wind and lightning. Through the chaos of men shouting below, the castle towers fell away beneath them, shrinking to shadows. Eli clung tight, his heart pounding, the rain whipping across his face. He had never known fear and freedom could feel the same. Above the clouds, everything turned quiet. The storm raged below, but up here there was peace. Ashwing's wings glided through the moonlight, scales shimmering silver and gold. Eli looked down at the world spread beneath them, rivers like ribbons of light, forests like dark oceans. He laughed softly through the tears streaming down his cheeks. "You did it." "We did it," Ashwing rumbled deep in its chest. A sound that felt like joy. They soared until dawn, until the sun rose over the horizon and turned the sky crimson. From far below, people in the villages looked up and gasped. Children pointed, shouting, "Ah, the red dragon flies again." But the elders only bowed their heads in silence, whispering that a legend had returned for centuries. Humans had spoken of dragons as monsters, but now they saw something else. A bond between fire and flesh. Something pure, something that could not be chained. Back in the castle, King Aldrin stood on the balcony, watching the dragon vanish into the sunrise. His face twisted in rage and disbelief. "Find them!" he roared, slamming his hand against the stone rail. "Find the boy and his beast before they return to burn us all." But no one moved. Not at first. Even the soldiers who feared the king couldn't hide the awe in their eyes. Eli and Ashwing flew beyond the mountains that morning. They crossed rivers, valleys, and snow-covered peaks. And when they finally landed in a quiet field by a shimmering lake, Eli slid off the dragon's back, collapsing to his knees. He looked up at the creature and smiled, breathless. "You're free now. Truly free." Ashwing lowered its head and pressed its snout gently against his chest. The warmth of that touch was softer than any fire. In that moment, boy and dragon stood not as master and beast, but as equals. The sky behind them glowed bright with the rising sun, and for the first time since the world began fearing dragons, there was peace, and a fragile, glowing peace, born from a single word spoken long ago: please. The first rays of dawn broke through the misty sky. Painting the mountains gold, Eli woke beside the lake, his clothes still damp from the rain, his body sore but his heart light. For the first time in his life, he had no walls around him, no orders to obey, no chains to hear, only the sound of water, wind, and the deep, steady breathing of the dragon beside him. Ashwing lay curled near the shore, wings tucked, eyes half closed, its scales shimmering with morning light. It looked peaceful, but behind that calm, Eli could still feel something restless, a quiet pain that hadn't healed. He sat down beside it, running his hand gently over one of the dragon's forelegs. The metal collar that had once bound Ashwing was still there, broken but not gone. Eli frowned, brushing mud away from the engraved mark. A royal crest, the symbol of King Aldrin's bloodline. It hit him then, sharp as a blade. "This was the king's doing," he whispered. "You weren't wild, you were enslaved." Ashwing opened one golden eye, watching him silently. Eli felt a tremor in his chest, a slow burn of anger that wasn't his alone. He could sense the memories hidden behind those eyes. Memories of chains, of whips of fire used not in freedom but in war. He spoke softly. "They hurt you, didn't they? Made you fight for them?" The dragon's tail shifted, scraping against the stones, the sound low and mournful. Eli clenched his fists. "You didn't hate humans. You hated what they turned you into." For hours he sat beside the dragon, piecing together the truth through scars and silence. He began to see flashes in his mind, images not his own. Soldiers shouting commands, fire raining down on cities. Ashwing roaring not in fury but in pain as the collar glowed with runes that forced obedience. Every battle, every death, had been the will of the crown. When the wars ended, they had locked the dragon away, too dangerous to be free, too valuable to destroy. Eli's voice trembled as he said, "All that rage, it wasn't madness. It was grief." Ashwing exhaled a slow, rumbling sigh that sent ripples across the lake. The sound wasn't just sorrow, it was release. Eli placed his hand against its scales, whispering, "You're free now. They can't hurt you anymore," but far away, freedom was not what the king saw. From the castle tower, scouts reported smoke trails across the mountains. "The dragon lives," said one breathless messenger, "and it flies with the boy." King Aldrin's face turned pale, then cold. "Then the boy has betrayed his kingdom," he said, his voice like steel, "and he will bring that beast back in chains or burn for treason." He summoned the royal army and ordered them to march before sunset. But in his heart a darker fear was growing, not fear of the dragon's fire, but of the boy who had tamed it with kindness. Days passed as Eli and Ashwing traveled deeper into the wilderness. They found an old ruined temple carved into the cliffs, walls covered with ancient markings of dragons and humans standing side by side. Eli touched one of the carvings, tracing the lines with his fingers. "It looks like they used to live together," he whispered. Ashwing lowered its head beside him, its breath stirring the dust from the stone floor. Eli smiled faintly. "Maybe we're not the first to understand each other." He began to study the carvings, noticing the symbols that looked like runes of control, the same kind carved into Ashwing's collar. One symbol stood out, older and deeper than the rest, glowing faintly when Ashwing's shadow fell over it. Eli leaned closer, his voice soft. "What is this?" The air seemed to hum with power, ancient and alive. Ashwing growled low, almost protective, but Eli shook his head. "It's okay. Maybe it's the key to breaking what's left of your chains." As he studied the mark, the truth unfolded in pieces. The collar wasn't just a restraint. It was a bond of domination, forged by the royal bloodline itself. Only the king or his heir could destroy it. But the bond between man and dragon had begun to rewrite that rule. When Eli had said please when he had shown compassion instead of command, he had unknowingly weakened the spell. Kindness had undone what power had built. That night, as they rested under the stars, the ground trembled in the distance. Eli stood up, scanning the horizon. Fires flickered far away. Torches moving in rows, the king's army was coming. He turned to Ashwing, fear tightening his chest. "They're tracking us," the dragon rose, spreading its wings, the glow of its scales reflecting the starlight. Eli shook his head. "We can't just fight them. They'll kill you." Ashwing let out a low growl, a sound that spoke of defiance and pain. Eli sighed, placing his hand against its side. "If we fight, we do it to end this, not to destroy." The army reached the edge of the cliffs at dawn, their armor gleaming, banners waving in the wind. The king himself rode at the front, his eyes fixed on the dragon that stood on the stone ledge above. "Eli," he shouted, his voice echoing, "step away from the beast. It's a monster. It killed your kind long before you were born." Eli's voice came back strong, clear. "No, your majesty, it only killed when you made it kill." The soldiers murmured, unease rippling through the ranks. The king raised his sword. "Then you leave me no choice." The first arrow flew. Slicing through the wind, Ashwing roared, the sound shaking the cliffs, flames bursting outward to shield Eli from the attack. The fire scorched the sky but didn't fall upon the soldiers. It formed a barrier. "A warning, not a weapon," Eli shouted over the roar. "Please, don't make it fight again." But the king's anger burned too deep. He rode forward, shouting ancient words that made the broken collar glow red once more. Ashwing howled, thrashing in pain, smoke pouring from its mouth. Eli ran forward, grabbing the collar, shouting, "Stop! You're hurting it!" The runes burned bright, but then something changed. Eli's hand began to glow with the same light, his voice trembling as he whispered, "Please, let go." The collar cracked once, twice, and then shattered completely. A blinding wave of light swept across the mountain, knocking the soldiers to their knees. Ashwing stood tall, wings stretched wide, fire burning bright but pure. The spell was gone, the last chain broken by a single human word. The king fell from his horse, staring in horror as the dragon bowed its head beside Eli. "You can't control it," the king gasped. Eli shook his head softly. "No, your majesty. I never tried to." And as the sun rose, painting the sky red and gold, the truth of the dragon's rage finally came clear. It had never been born from hatred. It was born from pain and healed by the only thing more powerful than fire: compassion. The mountain wind carried the scent of smoke and rain as dawn broke across the cliffs. Eli stood beside Ashwing, both of them bathed in the red glow of sunrise. Below them, the royal army had fallen silent, weapons lowered, armor glinting faintly under the light. No one spoke, not even the king, who sat frozen on his horse, eyes wide in disbelief. The chains that had bound the dragon for years now lay shattered at their feet, broken by a single word and a single act of kindness. Ashwing spread its wings, the air rippling with heat and light, each movement a thunderclap of power, but there was no anger left in its eyes, only peace. The kind that comes after pain is understood. Eli took a step forward, his voice calm. "You don't have to fight anymore." The dragon lowered its head, eyes soft, a gentle hum vibrating through the ground. For a moment it felt as if the world itself was holding its breath. King Aldrin's voice finally broke the silence, hoarse and trembling. "You've doomed us all, boy. You think mercy can tame a monster?" Eli turned toward him, his hair whipping in the wind, his expression quiet but firm. "No, your majesty. Mercy doesn't tame monsters. It reminds them they don't have to be one." The soldiers looked between the boy and the dragon, unsure which one truly held the power. A few lowered their weapons completely, while others took cautious steps back. The king's face twisted with fury. You dare defy the crown? Eli's voice didn't rise, but his words carried like thunder. I didn't defy you, sire. I freed something you broke. Ashwing's wings unfurled again, the heat rolling off them like waves. The soldiers shielded their faces as a gust of wind roared through the canyon. The dragon tilted its head toward Eli, waiting as if asking, what now? Eli looked at the men below. The frightened faces, the shining spears, the flags of a kingdom built on fear. He took a deep breath, then turned to Ashwing. Show them what freedom looks like. With a single beat of its wings. Ashwing rose into the sky. The clouds split apart, sunlight pouring through like rivers of gold. The soldiers fell to their knees as the dragon circled above them, letting out a roar so powerful it echoed across valleys, across forests, across every corner of the realm. But it wasn't a roar of rage. It was one of life, of release. The sound carried meaning. A message deeper than words. I am not your weapon. I am free. When Ashwing descended again, it landed gently beside Eli. The ground trembling softly under its weight, Eli turned toward the king one last time. Your kingdom will be remembered for the cages it built, he said. But I'll be remembered for opening one. The king's lips parted, but no words came. He could only watch as Eli placed his hand on the dragon's neck and whispered something that no one else could hear. The dragon's body glowed faintly, lines of light tracing across its scales like ancient runes awakening. A wind began to rise, swirling around them, pulling dust and leaves into a spiral. Eli stepped closer to the dragon's chest, his hand pressed over its heart. There was a moment of stillness, then a surge of warmth that spread through both of them. It wasn't fire, but something brighter. The connection between them had grown so deep it could no longer be broken. Not by chains, not by fear, not even by death. Ashwing let out a low sound, a soft, mournful cry, as Eli's eyes glowed with faint golden light. He understood now what the ancient carvings had meant. For one creature to be truly free, another must give something in return. Freedom had a price. Eli smiled faintly, whispering, You're free now, my friend. Don't let anyone cage you again. The dragon's wings spread wide, fire swirling around them in a halo of red and gold. The soldiers stumbled back, shielding their faces. And then, with one mighty leap, Ashwing soared upward, carrying Eli with it. Higher and higher they climbed, until they vanished into the light of the rising sun. From below, the people of the kingdom could see their silhouettes, the boy and the dragon, side by side against the dawn. Some wept, some knelt, and even the king could not speak. He could only watch as the creature he had feared became a symbol of something greater than power. In that moment, the legend of the wild dragon changed forever. It was no longer a story of rage and destruction, but of forgiveness and courage. Years passed, and the story of the stable boy and the dragon spread across lands and oceans. Minstrels sang of the human who tamed fire with kindness. Children carved wooden dragons with open wings, saying they brought good luck. And the kingdom itself began to change, slowly, quietly, learning that fear could not rule forever. They said that sometimes, when the mountains burned red at sunset, a great dragon could still be seen soaring across the horizon, and if you listened closely, you could hear a soft voice carried on the wind, whispering that single word that started it all. Please, no one ever saw Eli again. But his name lived on in stories, not as a servant, not as a soldier, but as the boy who freed a legend. And as long as dragons flew free across the skies, the world would remember that it was not power that changed them. It was compassion, and somewhere beyond the clouds, where sunlight never faded and storms never reached, a dragon with wings of fire and a boy with a fearless heart flew together still, bound not by chains or crowns but by friendship, the kind that even time could not end.